The night everything changed didn't feel dramatic at first. No thunder, no shouting, no warning signs written across the sky. Just the quiet hum of a city that had long stopped noticing people like me. My name is Emma, and at 67, I had learned how to disappear without ever leaving a room. That evening, I sat at the edge of the dining table in a house that technically belonged to my son, but in every way that mattered, had been built on my sacrifices. The soft glow of the overhead light blurred into a haze. I hadn't told anyone how much worse my vision had gotten. It didn't seem important. Nothing about me seemed important anymore. The smell of roasted chicken and herbs filled the air, but I couldn't taste anything. Across from me, laughter bounced between voices that used to feel like home. "Emma, we need to talk." My son's voice cut cleanly through the noise.
Calm.
Controlled. Too controlled. I froze for a second, fingers tightening around my glass. "Of course," I said, forcing a small smile that no one was really looking at anyway. "What is it?" There was a pause, the kind that feels rehearsed. Then his wife spoke. "We've been thinking about this for a while," she said, her tone wrapped in artificial kindness. "And we believe it's time for you to move somewhere more suitable." The words didn't land immediately. They hovered in the air like something unreal. "More suitable?" I repeated slowly. "You need more care than we can provide," she continued. "Appointments, transportation, supervision, it's becoming too much." Too much. I let that sink in. "I take care of myself," I said quietly. "I always have." "That's not the point," my son interrupted. His voice was firmer now, almost impatient. "What if something happens? What if you fall? Or leave something on? We can't be responsible for that." Responsible? The word stung more than it should have. "I'm not asking you to be responsible," I replied, gripping the edge of the table to steady myself. His wife gave a short laugh. "But you already are our responsibility, Emma." I felt something shift inside me then, not break, not yet. Just shift. "This is my home," I said, more to remind myself than them. "No," she said plainly. "It's not." Silence followed. Heavy. Final. "You haven't contributed in years," she added. "We've been carrying everything." The lie was so bold, so effortless, I almost admired it. I opened my mouth to respond, to explain, to correct, to remind them, but nothing came out. Not because I had nothing to say, but because suddenly I understood something. They didn't want the truth. They wanted a reason, and they had already chosen one. "We found a place for you," my son said, softening his tone again, as if that made it better. "It's nice.
Clean.
Affordable. They'll take good care of you. You want to send me away?" "It's not like that." "It sounds exactly like that." His wife sighed, annoyed now. "Emma, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. We're trying to do what's best for everyone." "Everyone."
Not me.
I nodded slowly, more to end the conversation than to agree. "When?" I asked. "By the end of the week," she said quickly. "We've already arranged everything." Of course they had. I stood up carefully, ignoring the slight tremor in my legs. Around me, life continued as if nothing had happened. The distant sound of a television, a phone buzzing, the faint clatter of dishes. No one stopped me as I walked away. No one asked if I was okay. Inside my room, I closed the door gently and sat on the bed. For a long time I didn't move. I just listened. To my own breathing, to the echo of their words, to the strange quiet that followed something irreversible. Too much. Responsibility. Move somewhere else. I should have cried. Instead, I reached for my phone. My fingers found the contact without hesitation. "Daniel," I said when he answered. "It's me." A pause. Then his voice, older now but still steady. "Emma? It's been a while." Yes, I replied. It has. What's wrong? I took a breath. It's time, I said. Another pause, shorter this time. I understand, he replied. I ended the call and leaned back against the wall. For years, I had made myself smaller so others could feel bigger, quieter so others could feel heard, invisible so others could shine. And now, they truly couldn't see me at all. But what they didn't realize, what they never bothered to ask, was that disappearing had never meant I was gone. It just meant I was waiting. The next morning didn't feel like a new beginning. It felt like the aftermath of something that hadn't fully settled yet, like dust still hanging in the air after a collapse. I woke up early, out of habit more than necessity. For years, my days had started before everyone else's. Quiet mornings had been my only space, time to think, to plan, to make sure everything around me kept running smoothly. Funny how no one ever noticed the person holding everything together until she stopped. I sat on the edge of the bed for a while, listening. The house was still asleep. No footsteps, no voices, no sound of coffee brewing in the kitchen. Just silence. Once, that silence would have felt peaceful. Now it felt like distance. I stood up slowly and moved through the room, memorizing it. Not because I wanted to, but because something inside me told me this was the last time I would see it as mine. The dresser by the window, the old chair in the corner, the faint scent of lavender that had long faded into the walls. I had lived decades of my life inside this space, and yet somehow I was leaving it like a guest who had overstayed her welcome. I didn't pack much. There wasn't much I was allowed to take anyway. A suitcase sat open on the bed, half filled with clothes I barely cared about. What mattered wasn't in that room. What mattered was already set in motion. By the time I stepped into the kitchen, my son was there, scrolling through his phone with a cup of coffee in his hand. He looked up briefly. "You're up early," he said. "I always am," I replied. He nodded, but didn't say anything else. "No, how did you sleep? No, are you okay?" Just silence again. I poured myself some coffee, though I knew I wouldn't drink much of it. My hands were steady, even if everything else inside me wasn't. "We'll drive you tomorrow," he added after a moment. "To the facility." Facility. Such a clean word for something that felt so final. "That won't be necessary," I said. He frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "I've made other arrangements." That got his attention. "What arrangements?" "I'll be staying somewhere else." "With who?" His tone sharpened just a little. "I'll manage." His wife entered the kitchen at that exact moment, as if summoned by tension. She glanced between us. "What's going on?" "She says she's not going to the place we found," my son said. Her expression changed instantly, tight, controlled. "Emma," she said, crossing her arms, "we already paid the deposit." "I'll reimburse you," I replied calmly. "That's not the point. It is to me." She let out a short breath, clearly irritated. "You can't just make last-minute decisions like this. Everything has been planned. For your convenience," I said quietly. "For everyone's benefit," she corrected. I didn't argue. There was no point. They had already written their version of reality, and I no longer felt the need to fit inside it. "I'll be leaving today," I said instead. "Today?" my son repeated. "That's not what we agreed on." I'm not sure I agreed to anything. That landed harder than I expected. He looked at me, really looked this time, as if trying to figure out what had changed. "You're being difficult," his wife said flatly.
No, irablia.
I'm being clear. Another silence. This one sharper. Eventually, my son rubbed his forehead and sighed.
Fine.
"Do whatever you want. Just let us know where you are." I almost smiled at that. For years, they had known exactly where I was, and it had never mattered. "I'll be fine," I said. And this time I meant it. By noon I was gone. The taxi ride felt longer than it actually was. The city blurred past me in fragments. Buildings, traffic lights, people moving through their lives without hesitation. I used to be one of them. Or at least I used to feel like I belonged among them. Now, I felt like I was stepping into something unfamiliar. Not because I didn't know the world, but because for the first time in decades, I was entering it without carrying anyone else. The apartment was small, smaller than anything I had lived in for years. But it was clean, quiet, and most importantly, it was mine. I set my suitcase down near the door and stood there for a moment, just breathing.
No voices. No expectations.
No one waiting for me to do something, fix something, be something. Just space. I walked further inside, running my fingers lightly along the wall as I moved. The furniture was simple, barely enough to fill the room. A couch, a small table, a narrow bed by the window. Temporary. That was fine. This wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning of something they hadn't even imagined. My phone buzzed. A message. From her.
Hope you settled in.
Try not to cause problems there like you do here. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then deleted it without replying. Let them think whatever they wanted. It would make everything that came next clearer. The next day, I met Daniel. His office hadn't changed much over the years. Same muted colors, same quiet atmosphere, same sense of control that had always made me trust him. He stood when I entered, his expression shifting the moment he saw me. "Emma," he said, softer now. "You look different." "I feel different," I replied. We sat across from each other, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he leaned forward slightly. "Are you sure about this?" "Yes." "No hesitation?" "None that matters." He studied me for a second longer, then nodded. "All right," he said, opening a folder on his desk. "Then let's go through everything carefully." The papers inside were thick, organized, precise. Years of preparation. "You've kept everything in place longer than most people would," he continued. "Transfers, agreements, ownership protections, it's all here." "I never planned to use it like this," I said. "No one ever does." I let that sit for a moment. "They think I have nothing," I added quietly. Daniel gave a small, knowing look. "That's usually when people make their biggest mistakes." He turned a page. "The property," he said. "Legally, it's still tied to you in ways they clearly don't understand." I felt my heartbeat slow, not with fear, but with certainty. "And the financial support?" I asked.
Documented, he replied.
"Extensively."
Good.
"Very good." For the first time since that dinner, I allowed myself to feel something close to anticipation. Not anger, not revenge. Something quieter, something colder.
Clarity. "They wanted me gone," I said.
Daniel nodded. "And now?" I looked at the papers in front of me. Now they would have to learn what that really meant. I left his office an hour later, the folder in my hands heavier than it looked. Not because of the paper, because of what it carried. As I stepped outside, the air felt different, sharper,
Cleaner.
For years, I had been living inside a story where I was an extra, present, useful, but never essential. They believed that story. They built their lives on it. And now, without even realizing it, they had removed the one person holding it all together. I adjusted my grip on the folder and started walking. They thought I had lost everything. They had no idea. I was the one who had been giving it to them all along. The morning everything unraveled for them began quietly for me. I was sitting by the window in my small apartment, a cup of coffee cooling between my hands, when my phone started ringing. I didn't need to look at the screen to know who it was. There's a certain kind of urgency that travels through silence before a storm, and I could feel it. Still, I let it ring a few times. Not out of spite, out of control. When I finally answered, I kept my voice steady. Hello. Emma, what is this? My son's voice came through, sharp and unsteady at the same time. Not anger, panic. I didn't respond immediately. I took a slow sip of coffee. Be specific, I said. I just got legal documents, he snapped. They say you're reclaiming the house? That can't be right. There has to be some mistake. There's no mistake. Silence. The kind that fills with realization, piece by piece. That house is in my name, he said finally, more quietly now, as if trying to convince himself. Is it? I asked.
Yes.
It is. I've been paying for it for years. I leaned back in my chair, watching the faint outline of the city through the glass. Have you? I said. Another pause. What is that supposed to mean? It means, I replied calmly, that you've never once asked where that money came from. That's ridiculous. It comes from my account every month. Yes, I said. Your account. I could practically hear his thoughts trying to catch up. Emma, what are you saying? I set the cup down. For the past 14 years, I have been transferring money into your account every month, I said, specifically to cover that mortgage. No, he said immediately, too quickly. No, that's not possible. It is. I would have known. Would you? I asked softly. When was the last time you actually looked? The silence stretched longer this time. In the background, I could hear movement, his wife's voice, distant at first, then closer. What's happening? She demanded. Put me on. He didn't answer her right away. Emma, why would you do that? He asked, his voice lower now, confused, almost fragile. Because you needed help, I said. And because I wanted you to believe you didn't. That truth landed harder than anything else. You're lying. His wife's voice cut in suddenly, loud and sharp as she grabbed the phone. This is some kind of manipulation. You can't just take things back because you're upset. I'm not taking anything back, I replied. I'm correcting something that should never have been misunderstood. You're trying to steal our home. No, I said evenly.
I'm reclaiming mine.
Her laugh was brittle. You haven't paid for anything in years. Are you sure? I asked. Of course I am. Then I suggest you check your statements. Silence again. Not disbelief this time.
Fear.
The transfer stopped 3 days ago. I continued. You should already be seeing the difference. I heard her breathing change. Faster. Uneven. That's, she started, then stopped. That's not possible. Look, I said. Muffled sounds followed. Drawers opening, something dropping, hurried footsteps. Then whispering.
Urgent.
Frantic. I didn't interrupt. I didn't need to. A minute later, my son came back on the line. His voice had changed completely. Emma, he said slowly, if this is true, it is. Then we can fix this. We can figure something out. There it was. Not apology. Negotiation. There's nothing to fix, I said. We didn't know, he insisted. You never told us. You never asked. That's not fair.
No. I replied quietly.
It's not. Another pause. What do you want? He asked finally. The question hung between us, heavier than anything else he'd said. I looked down at my hands. Steady.
Calm.
I want exactly what you asked of me, I said. And what is that? Distance. He exhaled sharply. Emma, don't do this. I'm not doing anything, I said. I'm simply stepping back. You're going to leave us with nothing. No, I corrected him. I'm leaving you with what you actually have. That hit. Hard. His wife's voice came back, louder now, no longer trying to hide the panic. We have kids, she snapped. You can't just destroy everything like this. 30 days, I said. What? You have 30 days to move out. 30 days? That's insane. It's more than you gave me. Her breathing turned into something close to a gasp. You're unbelievable, she said. After everything we've done for you. I almost smiled. Yes, I said softly. Let's talk about that. Silence.
Thick.
Heavy. Avoidant. For years, I continued, I made sure you never had to worry about losing that house. I made sure your bills were paid, your lifestyle maintained, your comfort uninterrupted. I did it quietly, without recognition, without expectation. That's not. And in return, I said, cutting through her voice for the first time, you called me a burden. Nothing.
No denial.
No defense. Just silence. 30 days, I repeated. After that, I will return to my home. You can't.
I already have, I said.
And then I hung up. The room felt very still after that. Not empty. Not lonely. Still. For a long time, I sat there, letting everything settle. Not the situation, I had already made peace with that. Myself. For years, I had questioned my own value in quiet ways. Adjusting, compromising, shrinking. Telling myself that love meant patience, that sacrifice meant strength, that being needed was the same as being appreciated. I was wrong. And somehow, being forced out had shown me that more clearly than anything else ever could.
My phone buzzed again.
A message this time. From her. We're going to fight this. I looked at the screen, then typed back slowly. You're free to try. I paused, then added one more line. Just make sure you understand what you're fighting. I sent it. Then I blocked the number. Later that afternoon, I met Daniel again. He didn't ask how the call went. He already knew. They received everything, he asked. Yes. And they're starting to understand. He nodded slightly, as if that confirmed something he had expected. The injunction is in place, he said. No loans, no transfers, no access to anything tied to the property. Good. They won't be able to maintain the payments for long. I know. He studied me for a moment. You're very calm, he said. I spent years preparing for a moment I never thought would come, I replied. Now that it's here, I don't need to rush. That's fair. I glanced at the folder in front of him. What happens next? They adjust, he said simply. Or they don't. And either way, you move forward. That night, back in my apartment, I stood by the window again. The city lights flickered in soft, distant patterns. Lives moving. Choices being made. Stories unfolding, without hesitation. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was part of that movement again. Not as someone holding everything together in the background, but as someone finally stepping into her own life. They thought losing me would simplify things, make their lives easier,
cleaner.
Instead, they were about to learn something much more complicated. I hadn't been part of their stability. I had been the foundation of it. And now, that foundation was gone. The silence that followed the storm was louder than anything that came before it. For 2 weeks, I heard nothing from them. No calls. No messages. No attempts to argue, negotiate, or apologize. At first, I expected resistance, anger, accusations, maybe even threats. Instead, there was nothing. And somehow, that nothing told me more than words ever could. They weren't fighting back. They were trying to survive. I adjusted quickly to my new routine. Mornings with coffee by the window. Afternoons spent walking slowly through nearby streets, relearning the rhythm of a life that didn't revolve around anyone else's needs. It felt unfamiliar at first, almost uncomfortable, but not wrong. Not anymore. That afternoon, I was folding laundry when there was a knock on the door. Not loud, not aggressive, hesitant. I knew who it was before I even reached the door. I paused for a second, my hand resting lightly against the wall, then leaned forward and looked through the peephole. He stood there alone.
My son.
No confidence.
No impatience. No expectation.
Just uncertainty. I opened the door. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He looked different, smaller somehow, not physically, but in the way he carried himself. His shoulders were tense, his posture slightly hunched, as if something heavy had finally settled on him and refused to move. "Emma," he said quietly. I stepped aside without answering, and he walked in. He moved slowly, taking in the apartment, the small space, the simplicity of it, the absence of everything he was used to. I could see the realization forming behind his eyes. This wasn't temporary comfort. This was what starting over looked like. He sat down on the edge of the couch, hands clasped together, staring at the floor. "I didn't know," he said after a long silence. I didn't respond. "I've been going through everything," he continued. "Accounts, documents, loans, all of it." Still, I said nothing. "Everywhere I look, your name is there." That almost made me smile. "Yes," I said. He swallowed. "The house, the business equipment, even the car," he said. "I thought I earned all of it. I thought I built everything myself." "You built part of it," I replied. "Just not the part you think." He nodded slowly, absorbing that. "I feel stupid," he admitted. "Not just because I didn't see it, but because I never questioned it." "That's how comfort works," I said. "It doesn't ask you to look deeper." He let out a quiet breath. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. I looked at him carefully. "Would it have changed anything?" I asked. He opened his mouth to answer, then stopped. We both knew. "No," he said finally. "Probably not." "Then that's why." Silence settled between us again, but this time it wasn't tense. It was heavy with understanding. "Everything's falling apart," he said after a while. "The payments, I can't keep up. The business, I might have to shut it down." I listened, not as the person who used to fix everything, but as someone hearing the truth for the first time. "She left," he added quietly. That made me pause. "Who?" He gave a short, hollow laugh. "You know who."
Of course I did.
"When?"
3 days ago, he said.
"Took the kids. Went to her mother's place." I felt something tighten in my chest, not for her, but for the children. They were too young to understand any of this, yet they would carry the consequences of it. "She said she wasn't going to stay and watch everything collapse," he added bitterly. I didn't comment. "What's left?" I asked instead.
He shook his head. "Debt.
Responsibilities. Reality." At least he was honest. "That's a start," I said. He looked up at me then, his expression raw. "I'm sorry," he said. The words hung there, fragile and uncertain. "I know that doesn't fix anything," he continued quickly. "I know it doesn't change what I said or what I did, but I am." I studied him. For years, I had waited for something like this, for recognition, for gratitude, for even a small acknowledgement of everything I had done. Now that it was here, it felt different than I expected. Not satisfying, not healing, just necessary. "I believe you," I said. His shoulders dropped slightly, as if he had been holding that tension for days. "But that doesn't change anything," I added. He nodded. I figured. Another silence. Then he leaned forward slightly. "Is there any way," he started, then hesitated. "Any way we can fix this? Not everything, I know, but something." There it was again. The instinct to repair through negotiation. I shook my head gently. "This isn't something you fix with arrangements," I said. "This is something you learn from." He looked down. "I don't even know where to start." "That's the point," I replied. "For the first time, you have to figure it out without someone doing it for you. That someone being you." Yes. He let that sink in. I've never done that before, he admitted. I know. That was the problem. We sat in silence for a while longer, neither of us rushing to fill it. Finally, he stood up. I should go, he said. I didn't stop him. At the door, he hesitated, then turned back. I really am sorry, he said again. I know, I replied. He nodded once, then left. After the door closed, I didn't move right away. I stood there, listening to the quiet settle back into the room. For a moment, something inside me wanted to run after him, to offer help, to ease the weight he was clearly struggling under, to return to the role I had played for so long. But I didn't, because I understood something now that I hadn't before. Helping him the way I used to wouldn't save him. It would erase the lesson. And this time, the lesson mattered more than the comfort. That evening, I sat by the window again, watching the city slowly transition into night. Lights flickered on one by one, like signals in the distance. Lives continuing. Problems unfolding. Choices being made. Somewhere out there, my son was facing a reality he had never prepared for. Not because he wasn't capable, but because I had never allowed him to need to be. That realization didn't bring guilt. It brought clarity. For years, I thought love meant protecting someone from struggle. Now I understood that real love sometimes meant stepping back and letting them face it, even when it hurt to watch, even when every instinct told you to intervene. I took a slow breath and leaned back in my chair. For the first time in decades, I wasn't responsible for anyone else's survival, just my own. And strangely, that didn't feel like loss. It felt like freedom. 6 months passed faster than I expected. Not because life suddenly became busy or full of dramatic events, but because for the first time in years, time belonged only to me. There were no interruptions, no constant demands, no invisible responsibilities pulling me in different directions. Days moved quietly, steadily, and with a kind of clarity I had almost forgotten was possible. I was back in the house. My house. Walking through it the first time after everything had settled felt strange, not emotional in the way I expected, but grounding. The walls were the same, the layout unchanged, yet everything felt different because I was no longer sharing it with people who saw me as temporary. The locks had been changed the same day I returned, not out of anger, but out of understanding. Boundaries, I had learned, only worked when they were real. I didn't rush to fill the space again. In fact, I did the opposite. I removed things, cleared rooms, open space where there had once been clutter, not just physical clutter, but emotional residue. The living room no longer carried tension. The kitchen no longer echoed with forced conversations. The house had stopped feeling like a place I had to earn my right to exist in. It simply was. And so was I. I started making small changes. New curtains in colors I actually liked, not neutral tones chosen to please others. A chair by the window placed exactly where I wanted it, not where it was most convenient for everyone else. I even turned one of the rooms, his old room, into something I had never allowed myself before. A studio. It began almost accidentally. A set of paints I had bought without much thought sat unopened for weeks before I finally decided to try. My vision wasn't what it used to be, but I could still see enough colors, shapes, movement. And more importantly, I could feel it. The first painting wasn't good. The second wasn't much better. But that didn't matter. Because for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't doing something for someone else. I wasn't measuring success by usefulness or approval. I was simply creating. And that was enough. We spoke occasionally. Not often. Not casually. But intentionally. My son called about once a week. At first, the conversations were short, awkward, filled with pauses and uncertainty. Neither of us knew exactly how to navigate what we had become. Something new. Something unfinished. I found a job, he told me during one of those calls. What kind? Maintenance work. City parks. There was hesitation in his voice, as if he expected judgment. That sounds stable, I said. It is, he admitted. It's not what I imagined for myself, but it's real. That word again. Real. I'm glad, I said. And I meant it. He had lost the business. That much was inevitable once the support disappeared. The loans, the payments, the structure that had been quietly holding everything together, it all collapsed faster than he had expected. But what remained was something more important. Awareness. I've been tracking everything, he said once. Expenses, income, actually paying attention. That's a good habit. I should have been doing it all along. Yes, I said simply. There was no need to soften that truth anymore. He didn't argue. His wife had filed for divorce. That news came a few weeks later, delivered without drama, almost like a fact he had already processed.
She's moved on, he said.
I see. She always said she wanted stability, he added. Turns out, she just didn't care where it came from. I didn't respond to that. Not because I didn't have thoughts, but because some conclusions are better reached alone. And the children? I asked. They're with her, he said. In another state. That part stayed with me longer than anything else. Children always carry the weight of decisions they never made. We talk, he added quickly. Video calls. I'm trying to stay present. That matters, I said. I know. And for once, I believed that he truly did. The biggest change, though, wasn't in him. It was in me. I no longer waited for his calls. I no longer structured my days around anyone else's needs. I had built something quiet but solid. A life that didn't depend on being needed. I joined a small book group in the neighborhood. At first, I almost didn't go. Old habits telling me I wouldn't fit, that I had spent too long on the outside of social spaces to step back into them naturally. I was wrong. The women there didn't know my past. They didn't see me as a role or a function. They saw me as a person, someone with thoughts, opinions, humor. Someone worth listening to. That alone felt new. We talked about books, yes, but also about life, about choices, about things that had nothing to do with obligation or sacrifice. And for the first time in years, I heard my own voice without filtering it through someone else's expectations. I liked it. I liked me. That realization was quiet, but powerful. One afternoon, as I was working on a painting near the window, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, a delivery man stood there holding a bouquet of flowers. For Emma, he said. I took them, slightly surprised. Thank you. Inside, I placed them on the table and opened the small card attached. Thank you for teaching me what real responsibility means. No name, but I didn't need one. I set the card down and looked at the flowers for a long moment. This was different. Not an apology. Not a request. An acknowledgement. It didn't erase the past, but it showed something had changed. That evening, I walked through the house slowly, not checking it, not maintaining it, just being in it. The kitchen felt warm, not because of activity, but because of peace. The living room no longer carried tension. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was comfortable. I paused by the window, looking out at the fading light. For years, I had believed that being valued meant being necessary, that love meant giving without limits, that strength meant enduring without question. Now, I understood something different. Value isn't something others assign to you. It's something you decide to recognize in yourself. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. My phone buzzed later that night. A message. From him. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted to say, I understand now. I read it once. Then again. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to respond immediately. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood that everything didn't need to be resolved right away.
Some things take time.
Some things should. I set the phone down and turned off the light. Tomorrow would come, just like every other day now, quiet, steady mine. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. The morning felt different, though nothing around me had changed. The same light filtered through the curtains, the same quiet filled the rooms, the same familiar stillness rested in every corner of the house. And yet, something inside me had shifted again, subtly, but undeniably. It wasn't the kind of change that comes from loss. It was the kind that comes after you've already lost everything that mattered and discovered you're still standing. I woke up earlier than usual that day, not out of habit, but out of anticipation. Not for anything specific, no events, no plans, but for the simple act of living a life that finally belonged to me. I made coffee slowly, without rushing, without thinking about who else might need something from me. The kitchen, once a place of obligation, had become something entirely different. It was no longer where I served others, it was where I existed, fully and without compromise. I carried the cup to the window and sat down. Outside, the world moved as it always did. Cars passing, people walking, lives unfolding in directions I couldn't see, but no longer needed to understand. For years, I had believed my life was tied to others, to their needs, their success, their approval. I thought my role was to support, to provide, to remain in the background so they could stand in the light. And for a long time, I accepted that, until the moment they decided I wasn't even worth the background anymore. That should have broken me. Instead, it revealed me. There was a time when I thought being alone meant being abandoned. Now, I understood that being alone and being free were not the same thing, but they could become the same if you allowed them to. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel empty. It felt complete. Every object, every room, every small detail existed because I chose it, not because it was expected. Even the imperfections, the slightly uneven painting on the wall, the chair that didn't quite match the table, felt right because they were mine. I finished my coffee and stood up, walking slowly through the house. Not checking, not maintaining, just appreciating. The living room where I now hosted conversations that didn't drain me. The kitchen where I cooked only when I wanted to. The small studio where colors had replaced silence, where creation had replaced routine. I paused in the doorway of that room. The painting on the easel wasn't finished yet. It didn't need to be. Neither was I. My phone rang around midday. I knew who it was before I looked. For a moment, I considered letting it ring. Not out of avoidance, but out of choice. Then I answered. Hello.
Mom.
His voice was steadier than it used to be. Not confident, but grounded. Hello, I replied. I hope I'm not interrupting anything. You're not. A small pause. I wanted to tell you something, he said. I waited. I signed a lease, he continued. A small place. Nothing special, but it's mine. I'm paying for it myself. I could hear the difference in his tone. Not pride, not exactly. Ownership. That's good, I said. It feels different, he added. Everything does. Yes. I didn't understand before, he said. Not just about the money, but about you. I didn't respond immediately. Not because I didn't care, but because I wanted him to finish. I thought providing meant I was in control, he continued. I thought that made me responsible. But I never actually carried anything. You did. The honesty in his voice was quiet, but real. I'm starting to see that now. That matters, I said. I know it doesn't fix things, he added quickly. No, I agreed. It doesn't. Another pause. But it changes something, he said. Yes, I replied. It does. We sat in silence for a moment, not uncomfortable, not forced. Just present. I've been thinking, he said carefully. Not about going back to how things were, but about maybe, eventually building something different. I looked out the window as he spoke. Different how? Slower, he said.
Honest.
Without expecting you to carry me. That almost made me smile. That would be a good place to start. I don't expect anything, he added. I just wanted you to know I'm trying. I see that, I said. And for the first time, those words felt earned. After the call ended, I didn't move right away. I sat there, letting the conversation settle. It wasn't a resolution. It wasn't forgiveness, not fully. But it was something real. And real, I had learned, was always better than perfect illusions. Later that afternoon, I went outside. The air was cool, carrying that quiet shift between seasons, the kind that doesn't announce itself loudly but changes everything over time. I walked slowly, not because I had to, but because I wanted to notice things. The way light moved across the pavement, the sound of distant conversations, the rhythm of people living their lives without asking permission. I used to move through the world like a shadow, present, but unnoticed. Now I felt something else, not visible in the way others might define it, but grounded.
Real.
As the sun began to set, I returned home. My home. That thought still carried weight, but not in the way it once did. It wasn't about ownership anymore. It was about belonging. I stepped inside, closed the door, and leaned against it for a moment. Not out of exhaustion, out of awareness. Everything that had happened, the betrayal, the loss, the confrontation, the rebuilding, it had all led here. Not to an ending, but to a beginning I hadn't known I needed. That night, I stood in front of the mirror. My reflection was still imperfect, still blurred at the edges. But I didn't need to see every detail to understand what I was looking at. For years, I had defined myself by what I gave. Now I understood something else. I was not valuable because I was useful. I was valuable because I existed. Because I endured. Because I chose to stand up when it would have been easier to disappear completely. I turned off the light and walked back into the quiet of the house.
No voices. No expectations.
No one waiting for me to become something else. Just me. And for the first time in my life, that was more than enough. If you've made it this far into my story, I want to ask you something. What would you have done in my place? Would you have stayed silent, or would you have walked away sooner? Sometimes the hardest thing isn't losing everything. It's realizing you were the one holding everything together all along. And sometimes the only way to be seen is to finally choose yourself.